Who's Your Brand? This is a channel where we figure out how to figure things out. And the one thing that we're figuring out today is how to choose a framework, a JavaScript or Java framework, whatever. I don't know. Maybe you got to find out your language too. I got to kind of find out my language too for the project that I'm doing. The project that I'm doing is a custom CRM. So let's jump right into it. So I found this article on, let me see, how to choose a framework. Very simple title article of hackernoon.com. And so we're kind of just gonna go through this and find out what criteria these people are choosing when considering a framework. So 4 criteria that HackerNoon suggests to understand are your timing, your technical properties and features, your community involvement, and consequences of choice. So that's one thing that I like to understand is often people are very cognizant of the pros of situations, outcomes, events, whatever, but often fail to look at the downside. So let's actually look at, Tim Ferriss has a quote here. He says, many problems of focusing our best are often solved by defining what to ignore. And that's super powerful. Let's just hear it just to make sure that that's what it is.
Take a note. Quote, many problems of focusing are best solved by defining what to ignore. Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, I think that's just about what it was. Hit it on the nail there. Tim Ferriss is phenomenal. I love him. So yeah, let's jump right back into the website. So timing. The time factor is very important when choosing a framework. Why? Because without time to study it, test it, and code that framework, it's pointless to struggle. That's a good point. We often have a short time for delivering a project, and introducing a new framework will almost certainly cause delays. Therefore, in terms of planning ahead on timing, we must check the quantity of code that this framework will make us write. Oh, that's interesting. Not only the actual time that we will take to write it, but how complex the code that you and your team will have to write is, as it will also cause a not little time loss. Okay. Level of complexity also impacts on how maintainable it will be. So the more code you write, the harder it becomes to support later on. That's a good point. E equals MC squared. Errors equals more code squared. I like that. It's a good one. The technical properties of a framework. The choice of a given framework can be affected by technical aspects. I'm improving my reading here. Not perfect. By the illusions given by benchmarks by the nice words that you could find on the framework's documentation. Don't be fooled. The best way to know whether what's promised is real is simple, by testing. Cut this out. Okay. Cut back in. So yeah, as pointed out earlier, we can't always test a framework, so we got to extract the most important technical feature from our information we can contrive. This is a really good one. Using a framework designed for a specific task is easier than adapting one to our needs. That's why frameworks are built in the first place, is to solve a problem, to solve a specific task, such as authentication to Google servers, or getting data from your web page to your database. That's why frameworks are created. So it doesn't make sense to try to engineer your framework to meet what you want to do. So yeah, begin with the end in mind. Will be better in terms of performance. Everything might look better, but if it ends up being slower than a snail, what's the point? That's a good point. Let me see. If we're choosing a front-end framework, it is important to check the cross-browser compatibility. That's something important to keep in mind, which is often overlooked for large-scale applications. Like I'm doing one. I'm doing work on one project where it's a PHP program. It's a PHP written off PHP and just JavaScript, jQuery, and I never check on Mozilla. I do I do check on Chrome. I size it down to fit my phone using the Chrome Dev Tools. I check on my phone as well, but I never check on Mozilla. I should probably do that. Something to keep in mind. But last but not least, knowledge. You need to know the basics to be able to choose a framework correctly. You need to know the basics and requirements to fully comprehend it. So that's extremely important. Please, again, beginning with the end in mind, understand why you're hunting for a new framework. Yeah, when you choose a framework, you obviously need to know what you're talking about. By this I mean you need to know what is the purpose of a framework. If you don't have the basic knowledge, it will be pointless to learn a framework as you won't be able to understand it correctly. Learn the basics. That's a good point. Yeah, knowing the basics of your project, knowing the basics of the framework will indeed make life easier. So if you don't know what your requirements are, which honestly at this point I don't have everything fully fleshed out, it's probably a good point to start. Yeah, I guess for me, it would be extremely helpful to pull out the list of things I need to do. I need a database. I need just some sort of, here's a good example. Create a run reports functionality. So something to kind of generate a PDF to condense all this information. I could definitely use a framework for that. A dashboard, I can use a framework for that. One last sold to, that's just, I guess a framework to display, to kind of have a graph. Well, honestly, wireframes of all of this would be the most important thing I could do, but we're going to keep going with this. And then I'm doing the Pomodoro method, so I do 35 on, 7 off. I go for a walk. My walks around the block take usually about 7 minutes, and then I work for 35. So I do 3 of those, and then today I took an hour-long break. So I think that's nice. It's nice to kind of break up your time periods here a little bit. What else? Add hold for purchase. These are just columns, sales total columns. Those are just columns. So I'm glad Google integration offline. That's the biggest thing. I don't know if there's an offline framework. I think it's just kind of built into HTML5 with caching. Filtering, maybe use a framework for that. But yeah, I think now that I have kind of all these requirements, I do have all the requirements. These are actually the requirements. I want to wireframe this stuff. So I'll do a little more research. In the 20 minutes or whenever my timer is up, I will move on to wireframing, so we can kind of get into that process a little bit more. But here we go. What makes a framework worth considering that people use it? How can I figure out if it has an active community? How many people talk about it on the web? How many people are actually using it? How frequently does a developer answer to the issue reports? That's a pretty important one. How many pull requests? These are some of the questions that can give you information regarding the involvement of the community. What are advantages to a loud and crowded framework, an active community, reducing the time needed to research it? That's a good point. Furthermore, if the company where you work is growing, which is just me, it will be much easier to find staff familiar with the framework. That's a good point. The community is active, but having an active community isn't the most important. What we need is a framework that fulfills our needs. There is always this paradox of time where there's more people, therefore more people will have. Let's say you're using the incorrect framework. You're using a framework. Let's say it's just like a framework that creates pretty tables, and you're trying to incorporate some nice pie graphs into there. Well, you chose it, nice one. You chose it because a lot of people use it, but so when a lot of people use it, some people probably have encountered the same problems that you have. But what you don't realize is that a lot of these people, this type of hack that you're using to try to solve the problem, to get some pie charts into this table framework, is it's going to take you just as much time to kind of do some janky stuff, things that you're not really familiar at all with, read some comments to figure out your problem. It'll take you just as much, if not more time, or maybe even a little bit less time, and a lot more frustration than to just use a framework that maybe not a lot of people have used, but at least it was made for that purpose. You have a pie graph. You use a dashboard framework with a pie graph, and you kind of just use the pie graph, and that's it. You just have to read a little more documentation. So there's always kind of a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, even if the wrong way is faster. Just know why you're doing it. Can we actually use technology in production environment? Future plans, consequences. Okay, possible consequences. If you work in a team, for others it may be hard to work in a team. Become familiar with it. Everything is another, but you made a choice without you have to face the consequences. Conclusions. There's no magic spell that will guarantee a perfect, unfailing choice. A good article won't make the choice infallible because there's always a chance for an unexpected mistake. It's not about finding the best framework. It's about finding the right framework. I like that a lot. That's really nice. Okay. Let's see what this dude says. So yeah, that's the first article we're diving into. Let's see what else is out there. I think some big takeaways from that are, just it's not about the best framework, the one that's most commonly used. It's about choosing the right framework. So that's something to keep in mind. There we go. Francesco Strazulo. That's a crazy name. I like it. Okay. Now that's it about choosing frameworks. I hope you liked my video. Give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to find out better ways, just crazy ways to find out who you are, who your brand is as a person, as a business. So thanks for tuning in. Peace.